Hi, this is Michael Wan, News Director for Radio Korea, and this is Culture Shock, where we talk about politics, entertainment, culture, economy, etc.
Everything that you possibly would want to know. I'm the Contents Director for Radio Korea. My name is Young Kim, and you are joining us on Culture Shock, which airs every day at 7 p.m. Pacific
Western
Standard Time and also 10 p.m. on Eastern Time. All right, today we have two very interesting guests joining us here today. You've seen documentaries, you've seen docuseries, you've seen movies, you've seen commercials. We see a lot in entertainment, and Hollywood is the capital of it. And we have two people who have been neck deep in the entertainment as well as the documentary scene for quite some time.
Yes, and it's Lesley Chilcott. We have Lesley Chilcott here, who's a very famous director, American documentary film director and producer. Her notable feature documentary films include Watson and Waiting for Superman, Code Girl, It Might Get Loud, and the most famous documentary, which won 2 Academy Awards, An Inconvenient Truth, which came out in 2006. I watched it in the theaters, actually. And I was
in
really
the theater.
moved by it.
It was a very eye-opening documentary. I remember not many people were really keen to the idea of climate change or really didn't even know what was going on or what kind of problems the pollution that we were creating had an effect. But, I think we're from that generation where they were saying that there was like a hole in the ozone. That was like the last thing that we heard. And then all of a sudden that docuseries or the documentary came out. And I think it really was eye-opening. And also joining us is Steve Prestemon, who's also an editor of many different commercials that's been aired on primetime TV, mainstream television, and also documentaries, docuseries. You guys have been working together for quite some time. I think you guys have quite a history together. And we were saying in the break before we came on air that there could be a new docuseries just on that relationship
The two
alone.
of you, right?
It could be.
So,
Exactly.
introduce yourselves to our audience, please.
Oh, well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. And that's right. We actually started working together on TV ads, commercials. And I think I won't speak for you, but I already had one foot in the documentary world. And, when you're forced to make 30-second and 60-second stories, I think you long for something deeper and something more. And independently, we both sort of found our way to documentaries. And Steve cut a documentary I did back in 2015 that tried to encourage teenage girls around the world to learn to solve a problem in their community by using technology and creating an app. And that was called Code Girl. And Steve did an incredible job
Great.
editing that.
What kind of commercials did you two work at? Did we watch any commercials that you two worked on?
I think it's fair to say that America's advertising or TV advertising industry is the leading, industry in the world. I mean, to work side by side in the leading industry in the world. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot to tell us about.
Yeah, it's very kind of alluring because I actually went to grad school as a documentary director, believe it or not. I didn't ever really direct anything. And when I came to Los Angeles, I actually fell into commercial editing by accident. But the great thing about commercials is it has a lot of money. You work with really talented, really smart people, and you do a lot of work. And it's just... and the money was good. So all those together, and then you get to meet smart people like Lesley. So I think I probably met Lesley around the Inconvenient Truth time. Probably.
Oh, really?
I think so,
Okay.
because remember I did a short stint at
At the place I used to work at.
the place where you were editing. I was helping them find someone to
Executive
run the company.
producer, yeah.
A new executive producer. But the funny thing was, we knew each other a little bit, but I kid you not, we would run into each other all the time at Gold's Gym in Venice.
Gym, which is pretty
Gym.
Wait,
apropos.
Gold's Gym?
Yeah.
Or?
Gold's
in Venice.
So you two
That's
worked out a
not
lot.
the one on the boardwalk, right? Or is that?
Yeah.
No, well,
it used to be.
In the early days.
Yeah.
It used to be on Ocean, but now it's one block off of Main Street in Santa Monica. And we both would run into each other in the morning before work.
On the
We'd be
stretching
working
mat.
out. It's like, hey, Steve, hey, what are you doing?
So you guys have history in Venice.
Yeah.
My parents actually used to own a business on the boardwalk.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
so I used to spend my
Which
junior
one?
high days. It was one of those t-shirt shops way at the end.
Yeah.
And then I used to go surfing in the morning. I know Venice has terrible surf, but what can you do? I mean, your parents are there, you work there during the day. So in the morning I'd go off surfing and
Sounds pretty cool.
just Venice. Oh, wow.
I
So
used
much
to-
culture there. That was like the #1 tourist spot in LA before.
Yeah.
But now a lot of homeless, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's cleaned up a lot. During the pandemic, it was really bad, but after a little bit, a lot of it's been cleaned up. I think there's businesses coming back. There are back actually, and there's street performers that are back as well. So
yeah, and so I had a house in Venice. It was just a few blocks away from Gold's, and so we'd run into each other. It's very apropos because Gold's was what made Arnold famous.
That's right.
Bodybuilding thing.
That's right.
So it's pretty ironic that kind of we built kind of a personal relationship, kind of running into each other at a place that would play pretty prominently in this story.
Exactly, right? And then
really full circle,
weird, right?
kind of
some years passed by, and then boom, you guys are working together. So that documentary is airing on the 7th of June, I believe, right? Through Netflix, and you guys have been working on that. Tell us a little bit about this documentary.
Arnold, right?
Yes. Arnold. And there are 3 episodes.
3-part series.
3-part series. We kind of think of it as one long film. Arnold's a film star, and I think both coming from the feature doc world, we sort of have the instinct to cut it like a film. And so the first episode is largely about the part of Arnold's life where he was an athlete and a bodybuilder and growing up in Austria, very humble beginnings. The second episode is more about his acting career. And the third episode that we're calling The American is about, being the governor and what he's doing now. So it definitely plays like one long film. But man, I got to tell you, if you want to get right to the challenges, this Arnold has done so much in his life. He only sleeps 5 or 6 hours a night. He's up at 6 a.m. He's constantly doing things. So,
he is a cyborg.
Yes.
Like a Terminator, like a machine, right?
So it was a really tricky thing to try and fit all of that into only about 3 hours.
Right.
I read an article about Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day when I was, in high school. And I remember reading that he was unhealthy when he was a kid, so that's why he started doing bodybuilding. Does he mention about any of those?
He did. One of our favorite scenes we had to cut was Arnold going to the hospital. He actually was sick a lot as a kid.
Really?
And he spent 5 or 6 weeks at a hospital. And the way it was where he was living in Austria is the parents couldn't come in. And so he would wave at his parents through the window, and the boy that he was sharing a room with had a slightly, better off family, and he would get bananas brought to him. And Arnold's like, "What is that?" And the kid would give him his banana peel. So his first taste of a banana was in the hospital by like using his teeth, on the banana peel. But
so it wasn't even a full banana; it was just the peel.
Yeah, it was just like the peel.
What a tease, huh?
Yeah.
It's just like,
I mean, it's there. I was just looking at the project not too long ago. And there's probably more things we cut out of the doc series than it's in it. So the series, the scenes that I cut, just me, but there's probably another 3 hours of material. So,
wow.
But you have to when you're telling a story, especially when we had to be so short. These are hour-long episodes, so it's generally, so they have to be pretty tight. So every scene has to speak to something, has to speak to a theme or to a character point or something. So you have to be very efficient. We didn't have a 10-part, Michael Jordan doc kind of thing, So we had to kind of, everything had a purpose, everything has a trajectory to it. What's really is just an American dream story is what it is. He's the apotheosis of an American dream, right?
You're absolutely right.
The most absurd American success story it's ever been, right? So
it's an American dream. I mean, it's amazing
It's
how,
like,
as an immigrant, that he
Exactly.
Conquered the entertainment world and then conquered the political world.
and he's a world champion bodybuilder.
Not only that, he overcame a lot of obstacles, as in like his pronunciation, for example, which he turned to his advantage, I believe.
That's right.
The
It's
charm that he had. Were you? There was another documentary that came out about him a long time ago, actually. In fact, Pumping Iron. Did you get any cues from there, or were there any elements of Pumping Iron or things that you wanted to kind of include in there as a part of Arnold's weightlifting history?
So it's so good you asked this, because one of the most exciting things that we got access to was all of the dailies from Pumping Iron. So between all of us, we've seen all of that footage, the outtakes, the unused footage. And so we have a lot of footage, probably almost 20 minutes worth of footage from those outtakes spread over our episodes, which I think is going to be really exciting for people to see.
Yeah.
It was all shot on film. It's all really good quality, and it looks really cool.
He mentioned a very important point, that he's an immigrant, right? So from an American dream perspective, this is like the ultimate immigrant story.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
they were even even talking about him becoming president, you know?
to change the law to make
You know what I mean? I mean, how many
Probably would've
immigrants,
ran.
That's
right?
that's a brief dalliance, yeah.
Yeah,
The Republican senator had that idea. So.
As you guys were covering this and you were seeing some of these lost tapes and all these other things, were there anything that, he's such a well-publicized man, everyone knows about his stories and stuff, even the faults and the goods. Were there anything that surprised you, something that came out from the left that you were like, whoa,
all the time,
even while you were editing?
I think, for me, I was, to be honest, I wasn't an Arnold fan. Like, I wasn't like a fanboy of him at all. But
How can you not be?
No, but just watched his movies, but not.
But he's a spectacularly
right?
interesting individual. He just is. And I wish there's a lot, he speaks in lessons a lot, which is interesting. But I wish I knew a lot of his, I was exposed to his type of attitude earlier in my life, because he really is I call him like the secret before the secret, or visualization and manifesting. He doesn't call it that, right? But he literally he developed a skill, I think, as a youngster, and then going forward in his life, to really visualize and focus on one thing. And his skill is to focus on one very specific thing, and everything you do in life at every minute is to get that one thing. You don't waste any time. You don't do anything else. That's all you do. And you get obsessed with it. And I think that skill is something that he's proven is really, if you're talented, you have to be talented. He had to be a world-class athlete. He had to be a tremendous marketer. He had to have certain skills. But it really was fascinating. His attitude taught me a lot about life and about how to focus.
He's very single-minded,
being very singular-minded.
Make a goal and just go for that.
It really does get you far. And I think he said something off camera that follows me all the time. He said that someone asked him, can you give me some advice on how to succeed? And he's like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I'm not sure. And he said, well, then I can't help you. You have to decide. Once you decide, I can help you. But if you don't make a decision, I can't help you.
That's why probably he made that American dream come true because of that goal-oriented mind.
Yeah, for sure. And he did it in such an unusual way. I mean, people forget bodybuilding was an obscure sport when Arnold popularized it. And there were other amazing people for sure. And he's the first one to give them credit. But to go from bodybuilding, when you see this early footage from Pumping Iron where he's walking around the beach, I mean, no one looked like him, and his group of friends. And then to go from that to acting and then be, our governor here in California, the bizarreness of the trajectory and all the layers, that's really intriguing for filmmakers.
So Lesley, when I see your work focused on like environment, climate change, women's equality, education. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, a movie star, sounds a little bit from the left field. How did this whole thing came about? Why did this documentary start?
It was sort of twofold. For me, about 5 years ago, yes, exactly what you said. Most of my work is in the social justice bucket, if you will. But I'm also fascinated by pop phenomenons that I don't understand. For example, we did a series which Steve also edited and was supervising editor on, called Helter Skelter, an American Myth, and that was about Charles Manson and the family and why 50 plus years later, why do we still talk about this little cult punk leader? Like why, and so we examined the reasons, what was going on at the time. What are the 5 or 6 things that take someone from being merely famous to just known worldwide, right? And I've done a couple other projects like that. And the pop phenomenon of Arnold was truly interesting to me. I mean, you go anywhere in the world and people know the Pope, Marilyn Monroe, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and maybe Bob Marley. Like everybody knows them. And I'm like, why? What are the ingredients? Like, why have we not tired of him as an actor or this or that? And then on a personal note, I was a producer on An Inconvenient Truth, as you mentioned. And when that came out in 2006 and we were out promoting the film, Arnold was pushing through, and Fran Pavley and all these people in his administration, climate change. It was called the Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32 here in California. And that was going on when An Inconvenient Truth came out. And a Republican governor was being bipartisan, recognizing climate change, and pushing through arguably the most important legislation on climate change we've had here in California, and ended up affecting the whole country. So the pop phenomenon and the environmental commitment were what drew me in.
And I think that environmental piece is really key to Arnold's character, because he wasn't a particular environmentalist until he got to be governor or was running for governor, and he was exposed to these people and they briefed him and he's like, oh, this is a big problem. I didn't know that. I should fix it. And so that's his character. You know, he really is a well-meaning person, you know, especially when public service. And so, and you present him with facts, he's like, oh, okay. Let's do that. And so I, as an editor, I find these character things very interesting. So you kind of bring out these character pieces because, you know, as one of the reporters said, he's a weird guy. He's a weird guy. Arnold's a weird combination of traits. He's weird, you know, he's not super conservative.
Right.
But he is, his economic policy is kind of conservative, but his social policy, his environmental policy, some people, I guess, would call liberal or whatever. And he's just a strange combination of things. And that's probably, and he's a bully, and he's also a charismatic and lovable, and really tends to his friendships and his relationships really actively. And so I just found he's just a fascinating dude. I mean, that's why he's successful, I think.
I have a question about when I know you did Amityville as well, right?
That's right.
That's kind of when you mentioned pop phenomena, then I understood. I was like, oh, okay, now I understand why she would be interested in something like that. You know, it's about Amityville. It's the most haunted house in history, but little do people know that it's actually a house where a lot of murders took place and a person kind of went psycho or something like that, which has something to do with supernatural dealings. But regardless of that, I mean, when you're coming together to cut something like this, to present a character, a docuseries is different from like a movie where you have like a storyboard and a design of where you want to go. Like, what kind of framework do you first have when you're creating a documentary like this or a docuseries, and how are you deciding to put what shots together and what material to get?
You see the way we just looked at each other? That's how it is.
It's the same. So it really is the same. And as digital as we all become, I still take the cue cards and write out the beats. And it's always twice as many than, you know, at least, than we can actually fit into an episode. And we put the board up and we look at it, and then Steve retypes it and has his version of it. And then we kind of look back and we see what we're missing and we're not missing. But it's very similar. I think the challenge with someone who has achieved as much as Arnold has is, how do you get to the essence of Arnold? Like, how do you show the Arnold we know and who's very popular and who has made it? So how do you give the audience something they know, but then how do you show a side of Arnold that no one has ever, has ever seen? And that part's on me because, you know, he was governor. He has talking points. He's very good at answering questions. So how do you get someone off of their performance and get into the real person, which you see that in all three episodes. There's the pop stuff too, the Arnold that, you know, we know and love. And it turns out although some of them are dad jokes, it turns out that he is actually hilarious.
They're all dad jokes.
Okay, baby.
I mean, from my perspective and my experience, documentaries kind of go like this, where you start with a plan, and then you start shooting, and then you throw the plan out the window because you discover something else.
Yeah.
And then to your point of how it's different than fiction films, you start out with the script. In documentaries, you end up with a script. It's exactly the opposite, right? And so it's like a painter versus a sculptor, right? So one is moving this way and one is moving that way, right? So we don't know the final film or the final series until we stop editing, right? Really, and so it's like to me, it's a process of elimination and a process of experimentation to see what works, and then you have demands of time and story and whatever else, right? Because Netflix was like, keep it around an hour, so then you make a whole series of choices because of length, right? If you didn't have to worry about length, we would have treated these stories totally differently.
Yeah.
Right? So
I understand that both of you had to go through some rough patches because you started this documentary pre-pandemic, and
Oh, wow.
you have to go through all this. And I wanted to know whether Arnold's team approached you two first, or was it vice versa?
It was actually our executive producer, Alan Hughes, was approached about the documentary. And honestly, he had the same initial reaction I did. Arnold, what's not out there, you know? And then immediately it was like, wait a second, he's actually incredibly fascinating. There are all these layers. And Alan had seen Helter Skelter and called me in to direct it because Alan was on another project. And so we had a really similar approach to making sure that we got to the real essence of Arnold. Because when you meet him, and I hope you can meet him someday, he really lets you in on his whole strategy and his vision and his way of doing things. And he wants you to succeed in the way that he has succeeded, you know? Like, I mean, he's about to turn 76. He's got the mini horse and the mini donkey and the animals and the pig. He could be kicking back and doing nothing, but what is he doing? He's launching an app. He has a newsletter 5 days a week. You know, he's got a self-help book coming out. Tashin, the art book, but he's got books coming out, and he's got the TV series, and he's got the doc. Like there's no signs. You know, his new goal is to live forever. So
His drama, the new drama, is #1 in Netflix right now in streaming,
so,
right?
yeah,
Fubar?
Fubar.
Right. Yeah.
And which, you know, you talk about the difficulties. One of the difficulties was that COVID, it was kind of the mediating factor in all this, right? So we had sometimes we would lose interviews because COVID was hitting and people didn't want to travel. And because, you know, with the documentary, you're a slave to your subjects, right? We don't pay them, you know, so they're coming because they want to contribute, right? So maybe they don't want to get on a plane. Maybe they don't want to have that shoot. So it pushed back. And then Arnold went off to do Fubar and kind of disappeared on us for 7 months. We were
That
thinking,
delayed us.
we were
the
thinking
drama
that he would
delayed
come back
you.
and
Okay.
forth, or unless he could go up there and interview them. But because of COVID, he didn't leave. He left Canada. He went to Canada and kind of didn't leave. And so we only needed him for a few more weeks. Like, we didn't need him that long, right?
Yeah.
And then he disappeared on us for 7 months. We're like, oh, okay, well, that's a bummer. So we had to wait around for him to kind of come back to life. Because that was a pretty intense schedule, I think. For him.
That Fubar was really intense. And
You went up to visit him once.
I went up to visit him. I brought my audio equipment, and we did a couple of interviews there, so we could keep going, you know, with audio.
Were you
We're
ever
starting
concerned that it wasn't going to pan out? Were you ever at one point like being like, oh man, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe he's not going to come back.
I wasn't because
you had to wait 7 months, you said, right?
Yeah. I mean,
There was a contract that was signed, right?
There's always a chance you go on hiatus where and then maybe you lose a lot of people because you run out of money and it's everybody go home for 3 months. But then, you know, when you bring out the team back together, maybe they're off on other things, and you know that there is always that danger. So we kept the team together. You know, the producers managed to keep the team together for as long as humanly possible.
So that leads to my other question. I think you guys just touched up on it. What was some difficult issues working with Arnold? Was there because, you know, he's 76 years old. He's been around. He's done things his way. I would imagine that he could be pretty stubborn, you know, and old fashioned with some things, and he'll be very firm with what he wants. I was wondering, was there any of that? Was there any creative differences that kind of clashed along the way?
He comes across as a dominant figure, in a way.
And he is, and he's, you know, he's physically large, right? So, and he's a large personality. But I will say from the very beginning, he and I had an understanding that no subject was off the table. And that I chose to do the main interview with him that you'll see throughout the series in his office, so that he would feel comfortable. His animals would be around or could wander in, or, you know, any of those things. And we talked about it. We said, you know, you have to talk about certain things, and you have to show a side of you that people haven't seen that doesn't have anything to do with your public persona. And it took a while to get there. It took several interviews. My sort of secret sauce with someone like that is I do a lot of audio only interviews. I just bring my sound equipment over. And sometimes it'll only be for an hour, or I would go over to his office and we would just talk about what we're going to talk about in the future. So it took him a while because he's an eloquent speaker and he's been public speaking, since he was winning, Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe in like the late 60s. But he got there and he delivered and he understood that this is the time in his life where he has to show a different side.
Sometimes you said you don't bring the camera because it might be imposing to the interviewee. That's why.
The camera, the amount of crew, the lights, everything. So it's just audio only. I'll bring my little Sony recorder over and it's just me and him talking.
And it's fascinating that the difference is like he'll swear more on audio than he will on camera. He acts a little bit different. He'll smoke, so it's like he's always chomping on stuff. So it's really annoying. But I think Arnold is a legend even to himself, and so he has talking points, right, about how he presents himself and how he presents his legend. And it took I think we interviewed him 9-10 times on camera. Probably something like that.
Yeah. Over 40
it took him
hours.
like 4 to get over the talking points.
Yeah.
And then by the 7th or 8th, he was talking about the kind of darker parts of his relationship. So it takes him a while, but he learned to trust Lesley over time. You could tell. I mean, as I watched the footage, you can tell he's getting more and more trusted.
So it does take time. Interviewing is a skill, not only a skill, but it's sort of an art form to try to get your subject to open up a little bit more, depending on how you want to do it. I mean, what kind of an approach did you have when you were interviewing him and when you were asking him the certain questions? Was that a part of it to get him to feel really comfortable where he could really open up to you guys and tell you the deep, intrinsic thoughts that he had?
Yeah. A lot of it was, I didn't tell him the questions beforehand, specifically because I didn't want these rehearsed answers. But I would say, okay, we're going to deal with the bodybuilding years for the next 2 days, and so we would do that. And then if he led me somewhere else about current family or something else, those things would go in there. And I would say, okay, next week we're going to, next time we're going to talk about your wedding, after that. And that was kind of my approach with him. But I would say during the interview, sometimes I wouldn't cut him off because he has these wonderful 15-minute explanations that we could never use. But a lot of times I would go over and get the shorter versions in the audio interview. And of course, his answer is, Lesley, why don't you make the documentary longer so you don't have to keep asking me for shorter answers, right? But there's a lot there. And he knew that we were going to play jazz a little bit and experiment a little bit. The other thing I do is he pays attention to everything going on in the room.
Surrounding.
So the eye contact, I don't use notes. I look at him the whole time and I really listen to what he's saying. And if I ask him a question about bodybuilding and he starts talking about, something that happened on the movie The Last Stand or something like that, then I'll go there, and I think that's a big part of it. But I can't take all the credit because he knew he needed to give real answers.
Oh, well, what she's not saying is that one of the reasons she does this no notes thing is because Arnold's competitive. So if you look at him, it's like a staring contest.
Oh, it's like a staring contest?
He won't break.
Oh, okay.
He would sit longer than anyone thought he would actually sit because Leslie's never stopped looking at him, right? And I think also...
I even asked, do you need a break? Nope.
And also the secret, I think Leslie's not going to say this either, is that this is the first time he's ever dealt with a female director.
You're right.
And I think
this is the first time, right?
I think that his answers were different because he has a tendency to what I call like bro out with the guys. Like, he'll swagger and laugh and he performs. He doesn't do it with Lesley.
Yeah,
and
you're
he can't.
right. Yeah.
I mean, he does. He kind of shows off and maybe, I don't think he flirts. He just kind of like wants to be charismatic and whatever. But I don't think that kind of the best stuff that I think that we got in the interviews was talking about his breakup of his marriage and all that kind of stuff. And he wouldn't have been that open with a man. I just don't believe it. And I think that was a big advantage we had.
What I heard from other actors interviews about Arnold Schwarzenegger is he's the funniest guy that they've ever seen. Yeah. So he can be highly inappropriate in private sessions, like very politically
like locker room jokes.
Locker room jokes. That he loves those locker room jokes.
So he's really quick too. Like his humor is not. You have to spar. Like his humor is not for the faint of heart, and that can be really fun. Like I'll tell you, we the first time we were at his house and we were setting up the interview, we had moved the furniture out of his office so we could have our interview chair there, and we had a couch from his office there. And he walks in, he says hello to the crew, and he sits down and he goes, I shouldn't do this because my accent is terrible, but he's like, I can't sit in this couch. This is slouching. Slouching is a loser position. And he goes, get rid of the couch, And he had the whole crew at that point because slouching was a loser position and he wasn't going to sit. So we had a chair picked out for him and we put that in.
He's an expert at holding court. He is... he will enter a room and he's joking and everyone's looking at him and he will hold that attention. Okay. He's expert at that.
Wow.
Both he's imposing, he's charismatic and he's funny, So it's pretty much the room revolves around Arnold when he's in it, I think.
That's right.
When you talked about like animals in his office, what kind of animals,
So he has a mini horse called Whiskey.
Horse.
And so when you see the series, it's going
to show
the
up,
beginning of episode 1, Arnold is riding his bike and you'll see the mini horse, Whiskey, and the mini donkey, Lulu, come running into frame and Arnold's following them on his bicycle. And they come in the house and they're a big part of his life. And then he kind of has a routine before he starts working every morning, and he will feed them and clean out their stalls, and you'll see that. In
so are they like housebroken or do they just go anywhere?
They go anywhere, and they see. I mean, the Lulu was in the house multiple times when we were there filming, and she didn't have an accident. So,
because I was asking myself, did I hear it correctly that animals go going back and forth?
Yeah,
in the
he
office?
Loves them, and this is
dogs.
one thing that I think is fascinating about Arnold is there's a lot of people that have done really well, but they're not happy. He really knows how to enjoy life. And he surrounds himself with, he got a new puppy while we were filming. The puppy's now an adult and he already had a dog, and one of his kids' dogs is there a lot. And now he has a pig. And so he's just having a good old time.
Well, he definitely seems like a very jolly person to be around, very experienced as well. Just a bunch of animals running around. It's just kind of like
sounds like that.
Sounds like a fun farm. All right, we're right now talking with Lesley Chilcott and also Steve Prestemon. They have a new documentary about Arnold coming out. It's a docuseries on Netflix, which will start airing on the 7th of June. We'll be back to talk more on Culture Shock.
엘리베이터 내가 다 와놨어. 빨리 다치기 전에 빨리 와. 빨리 빨리
잠시만.
진짜 아까 그 사람 찾으면 우리 늦었어.
그니까 진짜 엘리베이터 자원 너무 고마워. 내가 진짜 밥 살게.
근데 나 요즘 속이 안 좋아가지고. 모르겠어.
왜 이래? 내가 도와줘줄까?
근데 면접 끝나고 이렇게 맛있는 거 먹고
시작하자고.
소화제 먹고 맛있는 거 먹자. 조금 괜찮은 것 같기도 하고 잘 모르겠다.
And thank you for staying with us on Culture Shock. My name is Young Kim alongside Michael Wan.
Yeah, news director for Radio Korea, and Young Kim is content director for Radio Korea.
See, that job title is really important in Korea.
And we have Arnold Schwarzenegger docuseries director Lesley Chilcott and producer Steve Prestemon.
Editor.
Oh, editor Steve Prestemon.
Hey, so how did you guys start working together? You said it was through film, TV commercials where you guys rubbed shoulders, I guess, in that industry. I'm sure a lot of people kind of just, meet each other by chance working. What was like the first projects that you guys worked together, and how did you guys feel that, hey, you know what? We have a good combination going?
the first feature doc we did together was Code Girl.
Code Girl.
And at that same time, you were doing another documentary, and I remember you invited me to come in and watch screenings of it.
Yep.
And then I was doing another documentary.
Yep.
But this sort of transition, both having this commercial background to feature documentaries, not all editors can do documentaries. There's no script. Even on a commercial, you have a script of what's supposed to happen, and you got to keep it to 30 seconds. And even if you have done what we call story beats and planned the whole thing out, you have to, at least for me, I want an editor who will experiment and will say, okay, this was the plan. We were going to talk about this, but we ended up talking about this other thing, and it's 10 times more interesting. So let's get rid of this. And so you're sort of creating as you go. Even when I'm interviewing someone, I'm like, oh, that thing he just said goes with the thing that he said last week, and the quote that I just got from James Cameron about Arnold, and Arnold also said this. And so you have to be constantly playing jazz, experimenting, riffing.
And I think that one of the reasons we click is because we both have kind of disparate backgrounds. And so I cut commercials and music videos and trailers and all sorts of things, right? So I like to think myself as a chameleon. And so, but I also love telling stories and doc stories. And so there's times in this series, for example, when there's maybe a scene has a more of a commercial style, because she, Lesley would shoot these great kind of illustrations, or
I call them original photography, because they're impressions from, like, Arnold's mother and father aren't alive, and his brother is deceased as well. So we would talk about these memories from when he was younger, but there are no photos and no footage. So they're a type of, I don't like the word recreations, because they're more impressionistic.
Yeah, they are kind of literal recreations or anything. But we would, so there's a weightlifting scene early on in the film where we cut more like in a commercial style. Like we nicknamed the Gatorade scene, right?
Right.
And so, because I have like a commercial and music video background, so I can do that kind of style. Or you can do straight doc. So I think because we both have that kind of background and varying tastes, I think it's about, and who you creatively jibe with, because you can have really talented people who you don't get along with creatively. And I think Lesley's also very creatively generous, lets me win some battles, and then she wins some battles, and then that's good.
There should be some kind of compromise.
Yeah, always, because
each other,
right? I mean, easily a third of what I edit is gone, never to be seen again, right? And that you just have to kind of accept that it's a slave to the story and to the characters, and to maybe we find something better, way to illustrate the same point. But you just try stuff, and
painful process, right? To cut off.
It can when you're cutting it to time, when because Netflix is very much wanted it to be around an hour. It gets pretty painful. You're like, oh, but I really love this scene. I really love that that character. Oh, can we really lose them? But you can. I mean, you can sometimes.
Sometimes on projects, I find, I don't know about you, Steve, but sometimes your favorite scene is the scene that has to go. And it doesn't make any sense, because you're like, it illustrates these 5 points, and it has everything in it. But because you have bits of that somewhere else, or maybe your favorite scene takes 4 minutes and you only have a minute, but they say in the documentary world, you have to kill your darlings, right? So it's sometimes, or your favorite subject, like, someone was generous and let you interview them, and then you can't end up using them in the final cut. That's also a difficult
we also do this
decision.
in commercials. Sometimes if you get stuck on a commercial, it's only 30 seconds, right? And if something's not working, the first thing you do is take out your favorite shot. That's the first thing you do. And then see if it works, because sometimes you like something so much your
personal input might not be the right input,
or you're building things around it to make it work, whereas maybe it's not the right thing. So you just have to be kind of honest with yourself a lot too. I think that's
so working as a documentary creators, directors, and editors, when you're working with someone like Netflix, are they pretty open to your suggestions when you're like, you can't throw this out, there are 5 points here, blah 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 blah, and it has to stay? How's the reception on Netflix's part?
It really depends. In the beginning, because you go through these rounds, like rough cut, fine cut, locked cut, all of that. And initially, you have conversations, you say, this is what I intend to do. And then your first pass is usually, hopefully, different than what you said, because if it's slightly different, then you were listening. You were following the story. Unlike scripted, documentaries can take on a life of their own, you know, and become its own entity. But they gave a lot of, you know, notes, because Arnold, like we were saying before, is one of the biggest stars in the world, you know, and so they knew that there would be a lot of eyes on this. And so it was pretty collaborative, you know, but we always want the episodes to be longer. You know, a network always wants the episode to be shorter, you know, so there's an inherent conflict there.
They asked for a 3-piece. Did you want it to do like 6-piece or?
I wanted to do 4.
4, yeah.
And initially I was like, 3 is plenty, you know, and then I kid you not, 6 months into it, I sent the email, made the phone call, dear Netflix, can I have another episode?
3 does kind of sound short, because you have his bodybuilding years and the entertainment
the
years
3
and
segments
then
of his
politics
career.
years. So
And his life is messy, you know, that he was still competing when he started the movies. Then when the movies, he got into politics, and he still does movies today. So he's not like, he doesn't have this 3 like very distinct careers, right? He has it's a building. I called him the Austrian snowball. Like he learns stuff, and every career has something he learned from before, but it just keeps rolling downhill. So I think it's he's interesting.
I mean, in an interesting timing, he did Terminator 3 in 2003, for which he was paid $30 million.
Was he paid $30 million?
Then
Wow.
the recall happened. And actually the recall was happening while he was doing press for Terminator 3. So people kind of think, oh, he was done acting, and then he went into the governorship. But no, he was having
prime.
one of his biggest paydays. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to be governor now. You know?
Yeah, I remember him announcing it on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, right? Didn't he announce it there? I remember I was watching it live.
And he was interested in politics for a long time. He'd polled, and he had done some things early on.
So prior to that.
I just don't think that I personally don't think he could have won a Republican primary. He's probably not conservative enough, right? And probably the only way he could have been governor was the recall.
Oh, okay.
But you seem to be very interested in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a regular election, you think he wouldn't have had a chance? Okay.
Yeah, I think that primary voters tend to be more conservative for Republicans, more liberal for Democrats, and especially today, it's getting worse and worse, right? But the recall is just like one big bunch of people, and whoever has the most votes, not even a majority, just like whoever gets the most votes.
It was like a Hollywood movie.
It is.
When Arnold won the whole thing.
Yeah, there
it
were
was
over
like a Hollywood movie.
there were over 130 people, you know. And he says when you see the doc, you'll see. He says, I love those people, because you know, you had like Larry Flint and a porn star and Gary Coleman, and then people just saying crazy things, and he was like, those people made me look great, you know. So
and plus he was a celebrity, so I think, and like I said, the recall in California, the crazy part about it is it doesn't require a majority. So you can elect someone who gets 25% of the vote. That's true. Depending on how many people, I mean, it's like Trump today. The more people that enter the primary, the better chance he has. Right?
You're right.
So this had 130 people. It was like he had a great chance to win, because Gray Davis was unpopular, and he was kind of the only name in there.
Right. So Steve, Lesley, you must have known Arnold's inner circle people. You know, the key figures. You must have spent a lot of time interviewing them. Should we know some key figures that Arnold, you know? Yeah,
you know, we were talking about the delays from the pandemic earlier. It took me over a year and a lot of help from our producers and other people to get James Cameron, not because he didn't want to do it, because he was on lockdown in New Zealand. And so finally we're like, okay, we'll fly there. And then they went into lockdown and we couldn't even get in. So we thought, okay, we'll do a remote interview, because they came out of lockdown and then they went back into lockdown. And then finally, it was one of the last interviews I did. James Cameron was in LA because of Avatar for like a week. And he came and sat for an interview. And I'd been, you know, waiting for that interview for over a year at that point. And so James Cameron's really fantastic in it. Jamie Lee Curtis is really fantastic.
And True Lies, right?
Yeah. And Linda Hamilton is great.
Linda, ex-wife, right?
What's that?
Linda Hamilton is ex-wife of
James Cameron's ex-wife.
James Cameron's ex-wife.
Yes.
Sorry,
let's not get confused.
You're right. You're right.
You're creating rumors.
Yeah.
Sly Stallone's in there.
Yeah.
He's great. And
he's great. I think Willie Brown Mayor
Yeah.
Willie Brown is
Willie Brown.
You mean the
fantastic.
former House Speaker here, right?
Yes.
This is
Yep,
for the
that's
state,
right,
State
that's right.
legislature, right?
You know, we were told
Davis.
we were told during the filming that there's only a few people that really know Arnold, right? One was his buddy Franco, who died. Another one is
Right.
James Cameron, was one of the people that really knew Arnold on a real
And he
kind
does.
of, and he does. And then was
Maria
Albert.
Shriver, I would think.
And Albert's in the film as well, but Albert is like, he's very Team Arnold. He doesn't want to
Oh,
say
okay.
anything bad. He loves Arnold to death, and so we kind of need a little juice. We need a little.
Albert
something.
Busek's a real fan of
He is a real
Arnold's
fan.
from
He's-
when Arnold moved to Munich and did bodybuilding early on. I mean,
Oh,
he
like from way back
just
then.
He met him when he was
thinks the
18
world
years
of
old,
him.
or something like that.
18 years old.
Yeah, something like that.
That must be even crazier to see this guy that he met at 18 just bodybuilding, move
Yeah.
up the ranks, and then become governor and stuff.
Yeah.
That must be
It-
really crazy.
It really is.
You know, we mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger and how he was one of the Republicans that were very open with climate change and that subject. And you've also dealt with a whole documentary involving climate change, right?
Yeah, couple.
And also the different pollutions that are out there that's changing the earth and
Inconvenient
and-
truth.
yeah, so inconvenient truth, right?
Yeah.
In 2006, right around that time, I went to the Maldives for my honeymoon. And the reason behind it was they said Maldives wasn't going to be around any longer in 10 years, that it was going to sink, right? But Maldives is still there right
Still
now,
there.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are those people who believe in it, who believe that climate change is a thing that's going on, or there are changes that are going on within our climate, right? And there's some people who are deniers as well, right? You've seen it firsthand and you've done a whole documentary on it.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious if you could enlighten us on how you would speak to some of these people who are denying that there's nothing going on in terms of climate.
Yeah. I think in reality, there are actually very few deniers, but there's been so much rhetoric because climate change is not an opinion and it's not what news you watch, whether it's, how the news is presented, whether it's fact or it's got a rhetoric or a story with it. But if the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has released multiple reports, peer-reviewed reports. You literally have 999 scientists who say there's climate change and there's only one. And right now there may be none who say that there isn't. So what I like to say when people ask this really good question is, you go out there and talk to a farmer anywhere, even if the farmer is a MAGA Republican, even. They've seen what climate change has done to their land and how the process of farming and ranching has changed. So what matters now is how quickly we act. And since an inconvenient truth in 2006 and a lot of other efforts, the cat is kind of out of the bag. Companies have sustainability officers and people are trying to use less packaging, not just because of climate change, just because it's the right thing to do. Why spend money on more packaging? So we're all getting there. The real question is, are we going to act fast enough to mitigate catastrophic effects? And I don't know.
But there are people who has been claiming because of the climate change push and the push towards alternative energy, which means discouragement of using fossil fuel energy. But the gas price has been going up. I'm talking about just regular folks.
Yeah.
And it's their livelihood has been hurt. And all the products, the inflation happened because of lack of fossil fuel. And we still rely upon, ever since Biden came into office, I think he cut off Keystone Pipeline. He canceled that. And also pretty much fracking in the United States. But we still have to rely upon like Saudi Arabia and these countries that are hostile to the United States. So some people have been arguing, isn't it better for United States to at least pump enough oil to let our livelihoods better than just relying OPEC?
Well, I
for instance,
think what people don't realize
they're-
about things like the Keystone Pipeline, for example, is that that oil traveling through there was no guarantee it'd be sold in America, right? None. So the world oil market is an international market. So you can pump in Texas and sell it to Venezuela. There's no restriction on stuff that's here. So we used to have an international oil export ban. We used to say everything, in the United States, it's garnered in the United States, has to be sold in the United States. And we also, there's some other things that could stop that, but it's because it's an international market. You can't say we aren't going to be energy independent because whoever is paying the highest price will be sold that oil, right? So it's a conundrum, but I think, wind power is the number one growing, electricity generation form, and also solar. So this is going to be a non-issue pretty soon. Clean energy is going to be cheaper than fossil fuels, and it's going to be kind of a non-issue. It'll just take over.
I think that was the big issue for a long time, is that clean energy was a little bit more expensive because it wasn't at scale.
Yes.
And that changed about 3-4 years ago. So we're headed there anyway. It's just a question of whether or not we can get there fast enough. I mean,
if we could get these Tesla insurance companies to lower the insurance costs.
I think because people kind of feel it in their pocket since, between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the gas price did go up. So people have been complaining about, why.
And Saudi Arabia is about to cut their oil.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the gas price has gone back down now. So it's all fluctuating, but the writing's on the wall, in terms of us, just take all the politics aside. The writing is on the wall. We're past peak oil. We're years past peak oil, and we are transitioning. It's just, can we get there as fast as Germany? Like, for example, within 10 years, they were running on 90% renewables in the summer. And that's changed a little bit now. They've slid a little bit backwards, but we could do that too if we have the political will.
The irony is that, Texas is the number one wind electricity producer, right? The number one blue collar job in America, the fastest growing blue collar job in America is wind turbine technician, right? I'm from Iowa originally. Marshalltown, Iowa has a big wind farm manufacturing place. So it's all going to happen whether we are, the policies encourage it. The new Biden policies do encourage more fossil fuel. Getting rid of fossil fuels, but.
I definitely agree with clean, renewable energy. And I think that's the way to go. Schwarzenegger, he actually was quoted a little while ago saying that we should kind of reterm
like
climate change.
Let's not talk about it like climate change
focus more on pollution, because
that's his thing.
Even my house, we take out like a big bag of like garbage
trash
every single day. You mentioned packaging, and I agree. Packaging is intense, and especially because there's more single family households, there's more packaging and more individual products being sold. And I think that's also a problem too.
Do you know anyone who's pro trash?
No.
Nobody.
or who's pro pollution? Like, I
hope not.
worse air. I want my kids to breathe worse
Nobody.
air.
Yeah.
So, he says, he's like, we have to retool it and call it pollution.
Because pollution for Arnold is all about communication, right? That everything comes back to communicating and PR, right? And pollution is a concrete idea, right? Polluted air, polluted water harms people, and say that instead of global warming, which no one uses more, global climate change. That's kind of an abstract concept. But pollution is like, I see pollution. I see trash.
Yeah.
So he's all about making it concrete for people. He's good. He's very talented that way, like thinking about, things that are very concrete.
So I think your documentary is hitting the news waves. I checked this morning, and this is a CNN headline: Arnold Schwarzenegger apologizes for groping women in Netflix
Docuseries. CNN with that kind of an angle. It's like, that's the first angle they decide to go for.
I know.
Right?
They just went there. So
he apologized about groping women.
And one interesting fact is, did Maria Shriver, his ex-wife, did she participate in this documentary, or did she refuse to do any interviews?
We had a couple of really great conversations, and she was very helpful, but she politely declined.
Okay. And what do you think about this headline, focusing on this group?
I have not. So was that this morning?
This morning.
I have not seen that, but that goes to address what we were talking about before. We said in the beginning, we have to talk about all of these subjects.
But that's actually, this actually will bring viewers, don't you think?
I think so too. And also about his love child, right? He's now 25 years old, and does he talk about it, or he says he doesn't want to go there?
Absolutely.
He talks about it. He talks about Joseph is his name, and he really goes there and talks about all of these things in the third episode. One of the other things we have is just one of those like beautiful documentary accidents that happens the day we were filming Arnold at Gold's Gym. As we were filming him, Joseph walked in. It wasn't planned. He was working out. And of course, I ran over and I said, can we film you? And, you're here. And he's like, yes, of course.
And it already taken the mic off Arnold, right? I think.
Wow. So
It was
that was just
well-timed.
happenstance, right?
Yeah,
It
no,
wasn't
it was
planned.
total
And
It wasn't planned, and there's this
It was like a
great
signal, right?
scene where Arnold asks him to pose, and he poses. There's not a whole conversation or anything like that, and Joseph poses, and Arnold tweaks it a little bit, and you can see a reflection in the sunglasses, which is just so. I mean, we moved the camera to capture it, but it's still a happy accident, and it's such a beautiful, heartfelt moment because while Arnold doesn't like to talk about this issue because he doesn't like to hurt his family. It hurts his family every time. But when you talk about an affair, you have to be careful with your word choice because he has an adult human that he
True,
loves
you're
and
right.
that he's very close to. So he can't say I made a mistake. He can't say those things because he's got this wonderful person. So it's a really nice scene in the documentary.
Yeah, he addressed, I think, very well, kind of head on the groping and the love child stuff. Very open and very honest. I think he just wanted to own it, to get it over with, own it.
this is the first time he apologized for it, right? I don't remember him admitting about it.
He
prior to
apologized
this.
for which part?
I never seen him admitting that he groped women back in the day.
During the election, he famously said, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Oh, he did say
And
that.
I'm sorry, I've done
Okay,
inappropriate things, but this is more of a direct discussion.
He didn't say locker room talk or anything.
He
But
didn't say
Yeah. But you'll see it.
Well, at least he
in the
didn't
third
give like
episode.
I didn't inhale type of excuse
Right, no.
or
Right.
something.
Yes. Yeah.
He had relationship with Joseph ever since he was a baby, or he had no relationship and then he started off having a relationship down the road.
He had somewhat of a relationship, but it took him a while
question.
to realize that Joseph was his. And
Oh, he
then
didn't know
once
in the
he
beginning.
realized that, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
but he's so like similar to his
Yeah, he
father.
does.
Yeah.
His working out, like a lot of the Arnold genes went to Joseph.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and you
The
know
Kennedy
what?
genes must be very strong. I think. They must be
It's
very
a dominant trait.
dominant trait, yeah, for sure.
Imagine, though, your mom is Maria Shriver, who's a well-respected journalist and part of the Shriver-Kennedy family, and your father's, at the time, the most famous actor in the world, and you're a kid. I mean, these kids really grew up in a double public light, and yet they're all very close, and they're all very close to this day. That was nice to see.
And does he also talk about Donald Trump? He has some relationship with Donald Trump and being the apprentice after Trump left, and then him being a celebrity. He was the host for that, and they seem to really don't like each other.
When I was filming in Austria, we were, and you'll see this, we were following Arnold. We were on a little cart, and he was riding his bike, from Graz, which is a town near where he grew up, too tall. And we go by this building, and he's like, as he always does, Lesley, he goes, that's where we shot The Apprentice. And he pointed to the building, and we went by. And it's one of the things that's not in the doc, but it's not in there. But he's pretty vocal on social media. And we definitely wanted to provide some things that aren't easily accessible. So none of the Trump discussions are in there.
Yeah,
in
we
the series.
didn't. I personally see a lot of similarities in personality between them.
I can see that.
But
I can see
but I
that.
call
They're both alpha male.
yeah, but I
Definitely
call
alpha.
Donald Trump's Darth Vader and
Oh yeah, you
and-
said that on the phone.
And
You're right,
Schwarzenegger
you're right.
is
He's a
Luke
little bit
Skywalker.
better.
I mean, it's like really, it's or Yoda or something. He is definitely the light side. I think Arnold definitely uses his powers for good, for sure.
Oh, okay.
All of his
After
kind of
meeting him, right?
after
Yes,
his charisma and it's all of his public service work, he really does want to do the right thing. What he believes is the right thing. He really does.
Well, I got a question for you. We got about a minute left before you go, Steve. You told me that when you walked into this, you weren't really a fan, but I mean, did your perception about Arnold Schwarzenegger change? Did you come out a fan?
Absolutely. I always talk about how he presents himself kind of one-dimensionally. He wears cowboy boots and cowboy hat and smokes a cigar and he drives a Hummer, and you'd think he's one way. He is definitely not that way. He is definitely a layered fellow. And I think we reveal that in the Leslie did a great job of pulling these nuances out of him that you would never expect.
And Lesley, working on this documentary, tell us, I mean, it opens up on Netflix on the 7th of June. So tell us a little bit about it. Let's plug it. And
Yeah, Arnold will be in 190 countries on June 7th.
190 countries, wow.
In multiple languages.
Simultaneously.
It launches at the same time. That's the great thing about Netflix as a partner. You know, Arnold's an international star and they have such coverage internationally.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so
you very
much.
much.
Good luck on the documentary and we'll see you again.
Thanks.
Right, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
And that's it for us on Culture Shock. I have been Young Kim.
And I've been Michael Wan.